Thank you. Hello and welcome to the authoritative lecture on magnet fishing. This is normally a 2.5 to 3 hour lecture, but for today I've been able to cut it down to about 90 minutes and 1 hour. This lecture will be in-depth, wholly illuminating, and by the end of this talk, you too can be a profitable magnet fisher raking in hundreds of thousands of rupees annually. This talk is targeted for the general population because, as the New York Times recently revealed, they did a survey, there was a study, and it turns out 99.9997% of the global population participates in magnet fishing with great success. So as sort of a sample survey, here we have a randomly selected group of, say, 70, 80, 100 people. How many of you are current magnet fishers? Feel free to raise your hand.
I'm a fisher. I don't know about the magnet. That's my last name.
That's Liz Fisher. That's her name.
Nevertheless, I find this quite confusing. This is magnet fishing we're talking about. 99.999997% of you should be magnet fishers. This is what we would call it's not a representative sample. But no worries, this talk is designed for those who have never magnet fished before, the few hundred of you globally. And by the end, you too will be a profitable magnet fisher, hundreds of thousands of rupees. I ought to introduce myself. I am David Kramer. Now, some of you might be a little confused. I am not even closely related or tangentially related to David Kramer, the recent high school graduate. I'm David Kramer, former hedge fund manager. There was a little bit of confusion with the SEC, minimal at most, and I had a career change opportunity, which I took advantage of to become a successful, world-renowned magnet fisher. If you've probably read in the magazines, seen me on Discovery Channel, and of course, many of you have no doubt read my recent bestseller, The Authoritative Guide to Magnet Fishing by myself. And copies are available, and you can purchase one after the talk. I should say we've got a lot to get through tonight. A lot. We've got objectives. I will be showing you these objectives shortly, and we're going to have to move quickly if we're going to be reaching all of our objectives. So please hold all questions until the end. Thank you. Here we go. What are our objectives tonight? Well, we're going to start with, and this is all related to magnet fishing, of course. We're going to start off with the history of magnet fishing, then go to the science of magnet fishing. From there, necessary equipment you might need for magnet fishing, selecting a suitable location for magnet fishing, then techniques, magnet fishing techniques to help you become a prosperous magnet fisher, basic and advanced. Then we'll go on to planning a magnet fishing trip. These can go horribly wrong, as you'll learn in risks, which is not the next one, but what to do with your catch, magnet fishing catch, risks of magnet fishing, and then of course defending the legitimacy of your favorite sport, ultra sport, retirement plan, etc. And then we'll conclude with the future. And if we have time, we'll do a brief Q&A with you folks. So what is it? Well, aside from being a very popular scary movie franchise based on a novel by Stephen King, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, which I learned recently should not be trusted, magnet fishing is the sport of using a strong magnet attached to the end of a rope to find metal objects in bodies of water. Now, what should be noted about this definition is they used the H word. They said hobby. Magnet fishing is not a hobby. Everyone knows that. And more than that, it's insulting to the 99.99997% of us globally that are magnet fishers. Then, of course, what is it if it's not a hobby? Well, it's a sport, it's an ultra sport, it's not a hobby, it's an investment, and it's a lifestyle, a healthcare plan. It's the essence of cool. and so much more, and so much more. But most of all, more than anything, magnet fishing is intertwined with untwinable. It's intertwined. You cannot untwine it from humanity. For it has truly been humanity and magnet fishing that have shaped our world that we live in over the past, 2.5 million years. We'll get to that in history, though, which conveniently is our very next slide. So, the history. This is our first objective of our magnet fishing lecture tonight. The history of magnet fishing. And as I've said, the story of magnet fishing is the story of humanity. Truly. Now, can anyone guess, well, no, I won't leave it that open-ended. Can anyone guess who this magnet fisher was? If you mentally guessed Lucy of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, archaeologists discovered her remains in 1974, you would be correct. This was the first magnet fisher woman to be precise. Near her body they found shards of metal, obviously that had been magnet fished recently. Now some of you might be saying, was it magnet fishing that caused her demise? And the answer is no. They also unearthed a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton right around her, so it was later decried that it was the Tyrannosaurus that killed her. But we continue. History moves quite briskly, as you'll figure out in this slideshow. And so here we have Hammurabi's Code. That was, of course, created by the ancient ruler Hammurabi. He created a set of laws so that way people would know what would happen if they misbehaved. Of course, magnet fishing was rather prominent in ancient Babylonian society, so he came up with the law, if a man should steal another man's magnet fished metal, that man shall be struck dead, unquote. That was from 1750 BCE and quite progressive by today's standards. But again, we continue. Oh, and he also had this other law, an eye for an eye. Basically, if you gouge out someone else's eye, they deserve to gouge out your eye, which we now know, 2023, that if effectively employed, it leaves everyone either blind or with very bad depth perception. So we continue now. Ancient Rome. The Romans loved magnets. If you think you love magnets, go back to ancient Rome. You'll find people who love magnets even more than you. Here we have Julius Caesar being killed over a magnet fishing dispute. In fact, Brute of Et tu Brute fame famously stabbed Julius Caesar only because he had been promised a very expensive neodymium magnet. Now, if you don't know what a neodymium magnet is, don't worry. We'll get to that in the science of magnet fishing. I continue. Magnet fishing entered somewhat of a dark ages between 500 and 1000 AD. Here we have a photo, painting, Thomas Cole, Fall of Empire. This is sort of what happened when magnet fishing entered the Dark Ages. It wasn't magnet fishing's fault, it was just unintentional, it occurred at the same time. But we continue. The Renaissance was another prominent part of humanity. And there were famous artists. They were primarily magnet fishers, but they were funded by the Medici family in ancient Florence. Well, not ancient, Florence. And Raphael, Da Vinci, Van Eyck, etc., they all were magnet fishers. They primarily magnet fished, and when they didn't magnet fish, they would paint a fresco and sell it to sort of reimburse the Medicis for their financial support. The Renaissance ultimately ended because of an exhaustion of magnet geological resources, metal in the Mediterranean waters. In American history, there was the Boston Tea Party. Now, a lot of history buffs say the Boston Tea Party was when the Patriots dressed up like Native Americans and tossed tea into Boston Harbor. It was not just tea that they tossed. I mean, sure, they tossed a few cartons of Sleepy Time Peach, but primarily they tossed Oh, perfect. They tossed two very powerful magnets, neodymium magnets from Denmark, no less, which had cost thousands of rupees to transport all the way to the Americas, which disappointed the British when they were destroyed. We continue. The 20th century saw two global wars fought primarily over control of key magnet fishing spots. It led to the deaths of tens of millions, and again, it was all for magnet fishing, which is just another example of how intertwined humanity and magnet fishing really are. The Cold War began shortly after, oh, perfect, thank you there. The Cold War began shortly after the Second World War ended, and the Cold War is somewhat of a misnomer. There wasn't real intense fighting, or at least not as much as the global wars that had preceded it. Instead, it was a competition. It was a race between the two global superpowers of the USA and the USSR, who could create the most powerful magnets. Now, in order to do this, you had to use electromagnets. We'll get to this in the science of magnet fishing. And to make very powerful electromagnets, you need a lot of current, a lot of electricity. And the best way to have your conductive magnets is through the use of supercooled, cold, one might even say, wires and magnets and electricity. So they used liquid nitrogen to lower temperatures, and it was the Cold War. Let's see. Oh yes, so we continue now. In 1969, Neil Armstrong took a few small steps as a man off of the lunar module onto the moon. He landed in what scientists had dubbed the Sea of Tranquility. Unfortunately, he quickly learned that there was no metal to be magnet fished in the Sea of Tranquility, which is why NASA now regards these missions as somewhat of a bust. It was just too tranquil. The early 2000s saw the dot-com bubble. It's more of a mountain to me. And this, of course, was spurned and spawned by several prominent speculative magnet fishing websites, Magnet Fishing Online, magnetfishing.com, and perhaps the most famous one nowadays, Amazon.com. These sites where investors would pour money into them, and then turns out they weren't profitable, except for Amazon. Once they pivoted away from only selling magnets to selling magnets and books and other stuff. It's not too much. But anyway, in 2008, a cryptological currency was invented. MagCoin was how it was initially titled, created by the anonymous magnet fisher Satoshi Nakamoto. Unfortunately, it was very popular in the magnet fishing community, which was, of course, the global community. He changed the name to Bitcoin, and it's sort of lost its fame. No one uses it anymore, as compared to when it was a magnet coin, MagCoin, and used to transfer money between magnet fishers. Oh, I've got a piece of metal, you've got MagCoin, let's switch, and so forth. In 2022, we entered a recession. It wasn't a recession, okay? Because how can you have a recession when you have high employment? That's just not possible. A recession cannot be caused, and that's an art. Unfortunately, it was sort of because of magnet fishing that we entered the recession. If you look at the supply and demand curve, the supply shifted left because of an underproduction of magnets, which raised the price level, and unfortunately there was high inflation and somewhat of a recession. Not a recession, again, it wasn't a recession, because you can't have a recession with low unemployment. And then recently, Kevin McCarthy was ousted from the speakership because he would not allow any magnet fishing bills to pass. So here we have the science. Now, you might be looking at that photo of a floating frog and wondering, what? But it'll become clear quite quickly how that works. So some people might be wondering, well, former hedge fund manager, does he really love science? Trust me, I love science more than anyone else, which is why I wrote a poem about science, which I doubt many of anyone has ever done. So I'm just going to take a second here now to read my poem. Please enjoy. Let's all have a moment of silence for science. For it will be science, not violence, that leads America to a new greatness. Thank you. Now that you know that I love science, here, let me explain the science of magnets. Essentially, anything can be turned into a magnet. All you've got to do is get the electrons of the object to spin in the same direction. Heck, scientists have even gotten frogs to turn magnetic. This frog was in Amsterdam, unfortunately, in 1997, and some scientists took it and put it next to an magnet that was really powerful and floated it for a few seconds. They floated bugs, other insects, I think some water, and they could potentially do it with a human, except for you would need an incredibly massive magnet. But in some sort of hands-on science experiment here, let's turn this screwdriver magnet into a magnet. So basically, you can turn anything into a magnet. If it's metal, specifically iron is quite convenient. And if you have a very powerful magnet, now this is a 600-pound lifting force neodymium magnet. We'll get to all that means later in selecting a magnet. But if you want to turn this screwdriver, which is not previously magnetic, all you got to do is take your magnet and stroke it in the same direction. And now, if I take a paper clip, it should adhere. And another. Feel free to do this at home later on. Now, some things are diamagnetic, and there's paramagnetic, but that's beyond the scope. Again, in the book, The Authoritative Guide to Magnet Fishing by David Kramer, that's myself, you can find all sorts of useful and more in-depth information, and those are available afterwards. But some things are diamagnetic. For example, the element bismuth. The element bismuth is diamagnetic. That means it repels from a magnet. Here I have a small piece of bismuth. It doesn't really repel. I mean, look at that, that's nothing. However, if I have a much larger piece of bismuth, for example, say a kilogram, that will have quite the repelling force. Let me try just to bring it close, and you'll see what happens. I'm sorry, I could not do it this time, but perhaps you can try afterwards. I need a small drink there. That's about all for science. We continue. Equipment necessary for success. What sort of equipment do you need if you want to be successful? That's a way of rephrasing it. Rope is very important. The rope is the most important part of magnet fishing aside from the magnet. There's lots of different ropes out there. Hog's hair rope, too brittle. Whale's tail rope, too slippery. Squirrel fur, too soft. You'll just end up petting the rope, you won't use it. Cat string is just gross. And twine, don't even get me started on that one. But the best kind of rope is braided nylon. I have a photo here if any of you are visual learners. And if you see that there, that is basically what you want to go for. But how much rope do you need when you're magnet fishing? Well, I've created a simple formula to figure out exactly how much rope you need. You want to take the depth of water, add the height, add your height, and then multiply it by 90 feet, and that's how much rope you'll need. So for example, I am, let's say I'm fishing at Rings Pond. It's about 10 feet deep. Add my height, 6 foot, and then multiply it by 90, you get 1,440 feet of rope. It's conservative, but you don't want to run out of rope, truly. Then you can also, of course, always wear gloves. Don't wear only one glove. That's never a recipe for success. And sometimes wearing 2 gloves can get you in trouble as well, or implicate you in your ex-wife's murder. However, if you just go to your local hardware store, go to the magnet fishing aisle, and any of those gloves should be good for magnet fishing. We continue. Something that you should never bring when magnet fishing is music. It can be distracting. It can have curse words. It takes away from the purity of the sport. As well, you should always wear a swimsuit when magnet fishing, because if you aren't wearing a swimsuit, it can be disturbing to other magnet fishers. But most of all, what you need to bring when you go magnet fishing is a positive attitude. If you have a negative attitude, it's guaranteed you won't find anything. A positive attitude, you may not find anything, but that is very unlikely. And with a positive attitude, you can really do anything. We'll continue. Selecting a magnet. Now, in selecting a magnet, potentially the most important part of magnet fishing, there's 3 pieces of advice that I have for you that you should take very, very seriously. The first is don't use an MRI magnet. Now, this may seem obvious, but when I first started getting into magnet fishing, I magnet fished in Koi Lake, but once I was able to leave my house legally, then I started magnet fishing at the Hudson River, and there's a battleship there. It's the battleship of USS Le Jour, and I took these MRI magnets and I took my crew and I tossed them out into the water with my crew's help, and immediately my MRI magnet adhered itself to the battleship's wreck, and it could not be retrieved. It was a total loss, $30,000 down the drain. Which brings me to my second piece of advice. Don't use an MRI magnet. Now, I say this because then I went and bought another MRI magnet to replace the first one that I had, of course, unforeseeably lost on the battleship. And we went back to the same spot, but this time I had more men and women on my crew that were stronger than the first crew. And again, we lost it. And so I learned from that, is what I wish I could say. But my third piece of advice is don't use an MRI magnet. Very important. Again, I used another 30,000 MRI and it got stuck. It started to form what we in the business call an MRI magnet amalgamation, and it's very terrifying if you've ever seen one in person. Now let's go over some magnets that you can use, starting with the ones you shouldn't use and ending with the one you should. This is a ceramic magnet. Now this is actually a speaker, but every speaker at the back of it has a ceramic magnet. These are not very powerful and they tend to fracture quite easily. So what you want to do if you're going to use one of these is don't. However, if you do want to use a ceramic magnet, just find any old $20 speaker and break it apart, or if you're someone like me, go for the expensive Bose for a higher audiological and magnet fishing experience. Of course, don't use these. Then there's also the refrigerator magnet. This is somewhat of a status symbol, as it shows that you have no status whatsoever. They're useless, practically. So don't use a refrigerator magnet. Then, of course, the ultimate magnet that you should be using, the neodymium magnet. Now, neodymium is an element on the periodic table. It is number 60, according to this infographic. And these are some of the strongest magnets ever. I have, of course, a neodymium magnet over there, seated for now. We'll see if it zips around. And this is what they look like, approximately. And this is the only magnet you should use. Now, you want to start off with one that's, say, about 500 pounds lifting force. And that's because about 200 of that is, fake. It's just what the manufacturer says it's rated at. I use my 600 pound lifting force one, which brings it down to 400. If I subtract the 200 from it, that's just hype. And I use the 400, well, 600 down to 400 pound magnet because usually I can bench press around 300, so 400 isn't too much of a stretch for me. For you people out there, evaluate it based upon your own strength. Which brings us to, oh, and of course you should only buy one to start with. If I had bought multiple MRI magnets and then continued to buy multiple MRI magnets, I would be less wealthy than I am today. And so always start with one. We would go to selecting a magnet fishing location. The first place you want to look for when magnet fishing is a pier. Now, what's so great about a pier is boats often visit piers, and they drop metal. So if you do the math, you're more likely to find metal near a pier than, say, in the ocean, which we'll get to later. But if you do the math, then you'll find a harbor is a better place to go magnet fishing because there's multiple piers. So you do the math, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is more than just 1. And more boats, by that same logic, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is more than 1. Conversely, oceans, horrible place to magnet fish. You do the math, 0, you get 0 in terms of boats. I mean, look at that, there's no boats. And boats are the primary droppers of metal in watery bodies. The mafia is number 2. This is a lake, Lake McDonald in Glacier National Park, if you're familiar. This, to a magnet fisher, a complete bust. I don't see any boats. I see a person. He's probably not going to be dropping too much metal. You don't want to go somewhere like this. It's a wasteland. A wasteland. You want to go to a lake that's heavily trafficked because you'll find more metal there. We continue. Rivers. This is the Hudson River, a photo of Bear Mountain Bridge. Rivers are great places to magnet fish because the water only flows one way, from the headwater to the mouth of the river. Now, that's not true with the Hudson. Hudson flows both ways. But what's so great about a normal river is that means you start at the headwater and you work your way to the mouth. You won't miss any metal. Not so with the Hudson River. With that, it flows back and forth multiple times a day, so you'll have to work your way very incrementally and very slow with a massive team, but it can be done. It's an estuary, not a river. We continue. Canals. There are 3 canals that you should care about in this world. The first is the Erie Canal. Now it's mostly a pleasure canal. It used to be an industrial canal, so there's not as much metal on it nowadays as there used to be. Unfortunately. Instead, you'll mostly find just cigarettes, in my personal experience. But it once was the lifeblood aorta of New York State. Now it's just a vein at most. So stay away from Erie Canal if you're going to go to any one of these 3 canals. We also have the Suez Canal. This is, of course, once an image of the Ever Given ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, which I was very surprised when I didn't see more magnet fishers pouncing on it, because this is no doubt a 100,000 ton or more barge, and a ton of steel goes for, I don't know, $200, $300, depending on who your buyer is. And so this was like a $20 million ship that was ignored largely by magnet fishers. I, of course, was regrettably detained at my home during that time, so I could not pounce on this opportunity, but I wish more magnet fishers had. Then, of course, we have the Gowanus Canal in New York City. This is a prime area to go magnet fishing. Now, you do need to be wary of the oil, and as you can see here, shopping cart, toxic metals, toxic waste, just like dead batteries, dead animals, all sorts of horrible stuff. It's a super fun site. So PCBs and microplastics, it's all in there. But what also is in there is tons of glorious metal that you can magnet fish because a lot of people are afraid to go anywhere near it. So I would recommend, if you're going to go to any of these canals, go Gowanus or go home. And it's not that far away either. It's in New York City. Now we come to casting techniques. Now there's 3 techniques that you should be aware of. These are the Herkimer toss, which was first utilized by James Ralphie's in the 1923 magnet fishing tournament. Then there's the shot put, and then the bombastic brawler Whipstein, which I invented myself, actually. And for that, I'll need an agile volunteer. So, with the Herkimer toss, I'll demonstrate. 1 second. So I won't be using a real magnet in this demonstration because I don't want anyone to get hurt. Instead, I will be using this piece of twine wrapped around a fork that I caught while magnet fishing once that has been stabbed into a stress ball for safety and security. The important thing when magnet fishing is to be aware of your surroundings. I've seen it countless times where magnet fishers, seemingly to employ Hammurabi's code, an eye for an eye, accidentally gouge out each other's eyes with their magnets. And it can be very, very dangerous. As I unwrap this, just sort of think to yourself, am I an agile volunteer? Because I will be needing an agile volunteer, and there's some more qualifications that I'll be listing soon. You may be wondering why I'm using twine. I am not a supporter of twine. I prefer braided nylon rope. However, braided nylon rope can be quite heavy, and this twine is not. So with the Herkimer toss, what you want to do is take the magnet and hold it about 6 inches to 1 foot from your right hand. And you want to sort of have it hanging there with lots of room to swing around. Then with your left hand, also have the rope, or in this case twine, which again I don't support using, be able to run through your arm, your hand for enhanced controllability. The most important thing about the Herkimer toss is the wind-up. Now, I'm a righty, so I'm going to be twisting to my right. I apologize. But any lefties would be twisting to the left, and so forth. What I'm going to do now is sort of demonstrate it to you. Now, this traffic cone is the target. It's not too far away, so I should pretty much guaranteed to hit it right dead on. But if I weren't, then that would be a shame. Now, so I'm going to stand here. I'm going to twist. Now, when I twist, it's important you derive all your power from the twist. So wind up significantly, as far as you can without injuring yourself. And then after the twist, then you unwind. And as you unwind, you increase your kinetic energy. And at the peak of that, you want to release the magnet. So I'm going to do it relatively quickly and just try to visualize it and watch very carefully. So I'm going to be twisting. And then as I twist and I let go. That was pretty good.
Yes.
That was close. Now, the most important part is retrieving the magnet fishing apparatus. Now, with that, you want to sort of do an L with your hand and put the L on the twine and twist. That gives you more control over the rope. You don't want to let your magnet fishing find disappear after spending hours finding it. And if you do that, then there's 100% guarantee that you won't lose it. So there I have it again. That was the Herkimer toss. Again, used at every magnet fishing world championship. The other toss is the shot put. Before the one that I need the agile volunteer for, the shot put. Now, if you've ever played track and field and you've done shot put, it's a modified shot put. So what you do is you take it and you basically hold it to your chest. Now, if you have a pacemaker, be careful. It can pull the pacemaker out of your chest. But you hold it to your chest and then sort of turn it forward. So what you're going to be doing is pushing out. You're going to be shot putting the magnet over the target. So it's relatively easy to learn. Again, it takes only a few hours to master. Unfortunately, it's never been used successfully at any magnet fishing tournament, so don't use this, use the Herkimer toss. Now, the important thing that I forgot to mention was you always tie the end of your rope, or in this case twine, to something secure. And that's because if, God forbid, your magnet adheres itself to a passing boat or a passing metallic swimmer or some sort of thing, and it tries to pull it away, you can always, feel safe it's attached to something secure. Again, when you retrieve it, you want to use the L grab and L grab, L grab, L grab, L grab, and success. Now for the bombastic brawler Whipstein, I'm going to need a volunteer. Now there's a few qualifications for this. You need to be at least 6'5". You cannot be wearing any jewelry. Your hair must be no longer than 16 inches, but it must be shorter than, or no shorter than 16 inches. No longer than 16 inches, but no shorter than 3 inches. Now, if you fit in this category, please come up and I will make use of your physical abilities here. Do we not have any volunteers? Well, all right, so be it. We'll, Thank you, sir, for volunteering. I greatly appreciate it. I must comment you on your hair. It is quite long, but not too short. Now, this is the bombastic brawler Whipstein. Thank you for volunteering again. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the magnet, in this case, the fork and the stress ball, and hold it close to your chest. Again, don't touch your pacemaker if you have one, sir. Then start rotating around yourself. And then start spinning. All right, there you are. Keep spinning. Keep spinning. All right, now while he starts spinning and winding up, he's increasing his RPMs, rotations per minute, and building up the... Keep spinning, sir, please. He's building up his centrifugal force, so that way when he releases the magnet... Keep spinning! And he's building up his centrifugal force, so that way when he releases the magnet, it will be on target, it will fly fast and true, and it will land, and success will be his if he could just keep spinning. Thank you. Now, you have to get pretty fast. It's a tough toss to master. I did not use it to win at any magnet fishing competition. It's hard to even say why I invented this toss, but if you would keep spinning, sir, thank you. In about 5 seconds, we're going to allow him to release it and see if he lands on target. Sir, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wasn't horrible. You can take your seat, sir. Thank you. Feed spot. Well, thank you for volunteering. That was, of course, casting techniques. Now we continue on to planning a magnet fishing trip successfully. Because truly it can end up being unsuccessful. A group of my friends once went magnet fishing on a magnet fishing trip and were the inspiration for the film Deliverance. And others went magnet fishing. They accidentally left their buddy behind, and that was the inspiration for the film The Martian. Now the key part of planning a magnet fishing trip is the preparation. Now, I've conveniently marked in this atlas, which is of course obsolete by modern standards, where we might potentially want to magnet fish as I demonstrate this to you. This is northeastern United States. Now, you see all this white and blue? That is the Atlantic Ocean. Forget about it. Forget about it. There's no metal in there, or very little. Not enough to preoccupy yourself. Then there are these lakes, the Great Lakes. There are boats and lots of traffic in there, but not as much as there used to be, and not enough to sustain a vibrant magnet fishing community or a vibrant magnet fisher. There's the Hudson River right there. That's all right. We've discussed most of these features already, so I'll skip ahead to, once you find somewhere you want to magnet fish, what you want to do is zoom in. Now, you can't do it with this atlas because it's obsolete, but if you ever go online, you can zoom in online and do that there. Then what I normally do to plan a successful magnet fishing trip that goes according to timely schedules and whatnot, is I take several lengths of string, at least 5 or 10, and I measure out all the different courses of routes that I could take from here to my magnet fishing location. Then I take them off. Whichever one's the shortest is usually the fastest. And of course, you got to remember which piece of string goes to which part of the map, which route. Then, of course, when planning a trip, this is a little preemptive. Normally, this gets covered in risks, but I just want to stress the importance of this. The number one most important thing to remember is that you must avoid motels. I've stayed at motels much more when I was young and not afraid of these things, but you should avoid them like the plague, because sometimes I won't even go there. Here I have some examples of motels. Look at this one. There are criminals. These are criminal hotspots. You don't want to go to motels. Now the good thing, I will say the good thing about motels is if you never need to set an alarm clock in the morning. Usually I wake up around 3 a.m. to go on my magnet fishing trips, and thankfully there'd always be a couple next door fighting at 3 a.m. that would wake me up unintentionally, and I never had to schedule a wake-up call for that reason. But here's another motel. That one's quite distressing. Imagine what is lying underneath the bed. I mean, you have no idea. And these places, they actually make you pay to stay at them, which is remarkable. Here's one. It's better illuminated, but it still cannot hide the terror of a motel. And finally, we have this rather exciting motel, but again, red carpet, who knows? Who knows? Which would be my general gist when it comes to motels and magnet fishing. Advanced techniques. Advanced techniques are not meant to be taken lightly. Now, these are dangerous techniques. Keep that in mind. The first one is magnet fishing off of oil rigs. This can be dangerous. Oil rigs are, first of all, a dangerous place to exist. And more than that, when you take a kayak out to one of them and then bring back the kayak full of metal, I mean, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And unfortunately, I've got lots of buddies that did not make it back after their kayak sort of capsized with tons of ferrous and non-ferrous metal. So I would highly recommend against kayaking and magnet fishing off of an oil rig. The reward is not great enough to justify the risk. Then we have magnet fishing off of a bridge, say the old Tappan Zee Bridge, which you can't do anymore because it doesn't exist. But if it did exist, you could magnet fish off it, and I hear they put in a replacement. You can magnet fish off that one. The only variation here is you have to account for the height of the bridge. It's taller, so in the formula I talked about earlier, consider the height of the bridge as adding to your height. So, the Tappan Zee Bridge is, maybe 15 feet tall. Add that into your height and then multiply it by 90 with the depth of the water, and you're all set. Finally, there's magnet fishing with your mind. I have seen people do this, but it's very complex. Years of trial and error is the only way to get to it. I can't do it myself, so I'd be very surprised if anyone else can. We continue. What to do with your catch? Now, what to do with your catch? Personally, my number one thing that I always do with my catch is I have it appraised. I have it appraised by an independent consultant. This consultant, it's always a good idea to take on your vacations, have them fly with you on your private jet, go to Malaysia, take them to private parties in California, anywhere. And whenever I do this, when he appraises the metal, it always comes back highly appraised, worth much more than I would have ever thought. So then what I do is I donate it to charity, and it's a great tax write-off. And that's largely how I make so much from magnet fishing. Another way that you can do with your catch is you can sell it, either online or in person. The people who buy diabetic test strips usually also buy any magnet that you find. And AJ, who buys cars, also buys metal. And then finally, give it to the police. Gowanus Canal, I forgot to mention, that's usually where the mafia drops their weapons, or so it's been heard. I've never been there when that's happened, but if you recover any weapons, guns, bullets, magazines, you can give it to the police, and they'll usually appreciate that. Now, some of you might have looked disapprovingly when I explained how I don't really pay taxes, and I have a justification for this. Now, I don't use Social Security. I don't go to libraries. I have my chauffeur drive me as fast as possible when I'm on public roads, and frankly, usually I fly on my private jet. There's no need that I think that I'll ever have for public health care, and I've never needed a police or fire department because I have my own. And frankly, when I do support the government, it's not through taxes. Usually I donate a few depleted uranium shells to the military whenever they do fundraising annually. So here we go to risks. There are lots of risks to magnet fishing, but they are completely outweighed by the rewards and usually not even a factor. The first risk is most certainly a common one, metal plates in the head or other parts of the body. Now, it's happened. If you get it too close, it can be dangerous. That's all I'll say. Another one is neodymium magnets are actually somewhat poisonous to ingest and to touch and then ingest your hands. You want to keep it away. Now, this is actually a photo of someone suffering from heavy metal poisoning, I believe mercury. It's not neodymium, don't worry, this won't happen to you. Something else would if you decided to start eating your magnets. Which is never a good idea, I should restate, or state again. Then, of course, there is Cthulhu, the sea monster. Now, the good thing about Cthulhu is that he hasn't harmed a single magnet fisher in quite some time, and that's because of the ancient agreement between magnet fishers and Cthulhu, which has stated for the past several hundred years, as long as Cthulhu's domain continues to expand, he won't attack and consume any magnet fisher. So luckily, sea levels have been incrementally rising each year, which allows Cthulhu to have greater territory, and in turn, magnet fishers also have more territory. So sort of a win-win here. Then, also to be wary of are truck stops. Very, very scary places. I very infrequently visit these places, and that's because I had a friend, he brought his trailer full of metal to a truck stop, and unfortunately, when he was buying cigarettes, a gang came by, took the trailer. When he came out, they stole his cigarettes, even the one in his mouth, and then one of them shot him in the foot, just to spite him. So avoid truck stops like the plague, although they aren't as bad as motels. Another concern here is arithmetic. Now, you'll see here, I have an infographic. Arithmetic is used to control people. That's it. That's the only use I've ever seen it employed. If you look here, that is your pie. This is what you make each year. And look at that. Arithmetic is used to take a bite or a slice out of that pie, which is just sort of wrong, don't you think? Well, imagine how I feel. Look at my pie. They take a slice just as proportional, if not bigger proportionally, from my pie as from your pie. And frankly, you can't even see my slice, but it's bigger than yours, the part that got taken out. Bigger than your entire pie, which is not fair. And this is my salary pie. It does not include my stock option pie or my just other income pie. Here we continue. Defending the legitimacy of your sport with FERPC. That's the acronym I've created. And FERPC, what's great about FERPC is it's utile. It can be used in all sort of different scenarios. FERPC, I've used it at truck stops, rarely at motels. talking to other magnifishers, and sometimes online you just type "ferp." Everyone knows, don't mess with him. So what does "ferp" stand for? Well, the first F stands for fight them physically. You have an opponent, he or she is a misanthrope, they hate magnet fishing because they really hate themselves. That's usually what the cause of it is. Because everyone loves magnet fishing. 99.99997%, as the New York Times says. So I'm not advocating that you throw a few punches, but if they're throwing a few punches, you can throw a few punches. You're all right. Then there is, of course, fight them verbally. Say, no, you're wrong. And usually that makes them to go away. You can also argue what makes a sport a sport. According to Merriam-Webster, a sport is just a portmanteau of the word spoon and fork. I guess that means anything can really be a sport. Tell them if gymnastics is a sport, if can-can's a sport, if lacrosse is a sport, I'm pretty sure magnet fishing is a sport. And honestly, as we've already seen today, it's so much more than that, than just a sport. Then you can, this one's dangerous, insult their mother. Now, the dangerous part here is the mother might be a magnet fisher, and you don't want to insult one of your brethren, a fellow magnet fisher, especially not if they're a magnet fisher. Now, their son or their daughter, whoever you're fighting with, obviously did not respect their mother and went the wrong direction in life if they're saying that magnet fishing is bad. Then you can also run away. That's always a safe bet, but don't run away too fast at an inhuman speed, because then they might think you're some sort of cyborg enhanced. It can be dangerous. Then you can, of course, pay them to leave. It's a common question, ask what their annual salary is, and then give them 0.0001% of that, and they'll probably leave. Leave you alone, at least. They'll fight someone else. Then C stands for confuse them. Start shouting words in their face like person, woman, man, camera, TV, and they'll say, that's amazing. How did you do that? No one can do that. I don't understand that. And they'll be so confused, they'll leave you alone. So that's what's so great about FERC. And that's why use it anywhere everyone understands. Stay away. Stay away. We continue now to the MFHF, the Magnet Fishing Hall of Fame. Here are some notable figures in the Magnet Fishing Hall of Fame. The first inductee, the inaugural inductee of the MFHF was, of course, Rutherford B. Hayes. In 1877, two senators were magnet fishing on the banks of the Potomac. They both caught a piece of metal, and they were fighting who gets the medal. Well, even though one of the senators rightly deserved the entire medal, Rutherford B. Hayes decided to compromise and say, you know what, don't worry, this other person can have the medal. And for that, he compromised. They called it the Compromise of 1877. And so Rutherford B. Hayes was inducted that year. He was uncoincidentally the president of the MFHF for that year. That had nothing to do with the decision, though. Then we moved to Einstein, Albert Einstein. He started the Manhattan Project, which was an urban revitalization project that taught young men to be leaders of tomorrow through magnet fishing. Now, we'll get to an alum of this program later, but what was great about this program was it took kids that normally would not be magnet fishing in New York City, and then they magnet fished. Marv Croakey, he was an alum of the Manhattan Project. He rose up through the streets of New York City, and in 1963, which was the induction ceremony, for Barry Goldwater, he was magnet fishing in the lake behind the induction ceremony. He was the only one. And a private plane crashed into the lake, and Marv Croakey, who was a very strong dishwasher mechanic, he cast using the Herkimer toss and adhered his magnet to the plane and pulled it inch by inch, foot by foot, over a mile to shore, and the two inhabitants, a puppy and a baby, were saved and were very safe. And the whole convention center came out, they saw it, they decided, you know what, Barry, you're going to be the president pretty soon, so they gave that year's induction to Marv Croakey. An American patriot, truly. Here we are, our next inductee. He's relatively an obscure figure. He had a show in the 70s. I don't exactly remember the name, but it was about magnet fishing. During commercial breaks, which were very frequent in the show, it was presumed that everyone went magnet fishing. And so for that, this fella, Jerry Seinfeld, he was inducted into the MFHF. Yeah, and then naturally I was inducted into the MFHF a couple years ago. Now we go on to my premier catches. These are some of the things that I have found that are premier catches. So first of all, we have this nail. This was the first piece of metal I ever captured while magnet fishing in my Koi Lake when I was regrettably detained at my house. It just goes to show you, anyone can start from anywhere. You start small, one day you too might be in the MFHF. Then we move on. I found this screwdriver while magnet fishing. This again goes to show you, one day you too can be really successful if you start small. Then I also, they won't acknowledge it. The Indian government, for some reason, won't acknowledge it. But I discovered this one time when magnet fishing. I like to call it the Taj Mahal, and it's very popular nowadays. After I discovered it, then of course I have over there. You'll see this metal contraption. This I did not discover while magnet fishing, but I'm willing to sell it for $25. So afterwards, just see me, 25 OBO. So those are some of my premier catches. Now we go to the future of the sport. I prepared a little something to read because it's important. The future of the sport is unknown. The world is changing and fast. It's not the same world it was 20 years ago when I started writing my book. The future is unknown. Here are my predictions. Magnet fishing will grow 50,000%. It can't not, which is a misleading way of saying that it must. The world economy relies upon metal and magnets, and if we stop growing, we're shrinking. I dream of a world where no one works for money. We'll be back on the bimetallic standard, which is, of course, neodymium and iron. In the morning, instead of working in the coal mine, Big Papa will go off to work at the pier. So will Big Mama, and Big Brother, and Little Brother, and the twins, and Little Sister, and so will Baby. The Midwest will be a desert. No one will live there. Everyone will live on the coasts, and the combined weight of the population will force Miami down under the waves. Finally. Poverty will be a thing of the past, except for the poor, and unemployment will solely be the domain of good-for-nothing millennials. All countries will be friends and financially equal, except for America, which will always be number one. And the average lifespan will be 500 years. And of course, the Taiwan region of China will acquiesce. World borders will not matter, except for the US-Mexico border, and there will be health care for everyone, unless you get sick. Back to magnet fishing. As most everyone knows, all sports have seen a recent resurgence in popularity, mostly because of the harsh policing that was put in effect after the 2019 Super Bowl, when it was uncovered that the referees had been doping. Now, every single sport, except for the most banal, like can-can, lawn darts, or lacrosse, have all seen record recruitment rates. It's predicted that by the year 2032, over 18 billion people will be magnet fishers. It's as they say, join or die. Now is the time to invest in magnet fishing. Experts predict that over the next 30 years, magnet fishing could have a market capitalization of over $70 trillion. And it makes sense. Sea levels are going to rise an incalculable amount. Temperatures will be rising too. And more magnet fishing. Will the Earth run out of metal to magnet fish someday? Could be. Could be. But frankly, I predict that by then, humanity will have colonized the galaxy, or at least our very own solar system. As they say, Mars is the red planet, and that's because of all the iron oxide on it, which is a great attraction for magnet fishers. No pun intended. But if there's anything you should know about the future of magnet fishing, it is that it is not locked in. Unless you are a Calvinist and you believe in predestination, in which case I apologize for deeply offending you, but I think you already knew I was going to say that. The future of magnet fishing is truly whatever you will make of it. Do you remember at the beginning when I said that the story of magnet fishing is a story of humanity? Well, it still is. It was there when we crawled out of the cradle of Africa 60,000 years ago, and it was there when we went to the moon. Heck, it'll probably be there once we visit the sun or colonize the galaxy. However, magnet fishing is as much a part of us as we are of part of magnet fishing. Without our guiding hands to push magnet fishing to new heights, we might as well give up and go back to the caves. But this will not occur. The reason? No room in the caves for billions of magnet fishers. The other reason is I believe in humanity and humanity's potential to keep improving, to keep striding forward, and to keep getting better at magnet fishing. Although we may stumble, magnet fishers do not give up. Along the road to greatness, there will be potholes. The tires of humanity may be slashed when humanity parks in a sketchy part of town. The windows of humanity may even be shattered every once in a while by the vagrant criminals of society. But as long as there are people like you who have the patience and the stamina to sit through and enjoy a lengthy discourse on magnet fishing, I have faith in the future of magnet fishing, and in turn, the future of humanity. And I have a feeling, more so, that potholes, knife holes, and window holes will be no challenge to a society of magnet fishers. The future is your story to tell, so please, get out there and get magnet fishing. Thank you for your time.